mean, obviously we are a not very diverse panel. I don't know. I did notice that.
I really wish there were some men on this panel.
I just think that'd be great. I'd love to hear some other perspectives.
I will say right now, honestly, it's really nice hearing all of you women just talk about this and, getting everything acknowledged and such. And I really do appreciate that a lot. So thank you so much for doing this.
What I'll say too, like Jeff said, having women actually could be a lot more in the forefront of LARPing and designing and stuff. It's fantastic and necessary.
Thank you, Morgan. Because I really want to actually move a little bit away from talking about in-character gender in LARP and talk a little bit about all of you have somehow risen, through these ranks of LARP, being presumably empowered in some way or mentored by someone, or maybe there's someone you are mentoring. But let's talk a little bit about women in positions of power in the meta structure of LARP and how that is something to encourage and to, and not just women, but also all genders. Yeah. How can we be better about making that inclusive as well?
I have a quick comment.
Yes,
it plays from that talk about gender roles in LARP to gender roles outside of organizing LARP. And there is currently, and it's very traditional, gender role for the organizers of LARP. Women are the still emotional labor. They're the coordinators, they're the social support, then the men are the storytellers and the writers. It's not always true, but that is kind of a gender trend. And even women, there was a women in business, or there was a business panel earlier, and it showed a bunch of people who are in the business, and all the people on the business side, right, the business tax forms and all that kind of stuff were the women, and all the people on the story creation side were the men. I don't fall into that. I write stories. I run the LARPs. I write the LARPs. I am terrified by tax forms, but I actually have to do them right now because it's just me. But I'd love to pass that off to someone else.
Is effectively almost single-handedly kind of brought our style over. I'm sure other people were going over. She's one of the first people to go over to some of to Festival and to bring this game back over and cultivated brought over games, hopefully translation, doing a lot of that effort, and just seeing her as kind of the default person who always knows the most about this thing is enormous. I never once questioned that I could have a space playing or designing or doing anything that I wanted within this. And also, I think that there's basically sort of no jerks can be a difficult thing to maintain, but somehow it kind of works. That it's just I think that the moment we get a sense in which somebody doesn't sort of subscribe to gender parity, that they're probably not a right fit for our community. And so just having that be the default, I think it makes it
sometimes change them slowly.
Yeah. I mean, Lizzie Stark notwithstanding, that you're absolutely right.
And again, and I know that this is a privilege, that this is, as you're saying, when you can create something new, where effectively this is sort of a new gaming community that was sort of brought up out of nothing by a single person. You can change a lot more than working within an existing system, an existing locality that already has a game culture there.
Yeah. So I noticed it yesterday at Martin Elrickson's keynote, where he put up the 5 members of the band for the New World of Darkness, and they were all 5 men for the leaders. And I thought, well, that's it. Just something I noticed right off the bat. And there's a lot of boys club that still goes on, and it is very difficult. I am. My partner, Ben, is sometimes more of a feminist than I am, and he is insistent about pushing me to the forefront constantly, because he thinks that if we stand next to each other, then everyone defaults to him, but just
You
by
mentioned that in the panel yesterday,
Yeah.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard similar things from other, like, Michael and Ashley. He'll say, people keep, like, why does everyone keep coming to me? They need to go to Ashley. Ashley knows all the things.
Yep.
Like, and he'll post it repeatedly, like, stop coming to me about this.
Yeah. And so it's very interesting. We actually sometimes use some of it to the advantage of the fact that I am actually Ben is more soft and
Emotional.
and I am actually the heavy in many of the interactions, and so it's actually kind of funny sometimes in that people will be like, oh, go to her, because that way you'll get, and then they get, and so that you can play with the expectations, but the expectations are there, and so I sat at a table at lunch today where there were many designers all the way around. We were going through, and there were 12 of us, and it was me, and 11 men and me. And this is pretty much the default in a lot of the spaces, unless you're in theater style art, and particularly the Nordic style art, where there's a lot more parity. Our demographics for New Romantic School this summer are looking like roughly between 60 and 65% women, and so there are. This is a space that's feeling a bit more welcoming, but it's also not as combat oriented. So I don't know what that means yet.
So your target audience
but
may be a
also,
little more female.
specifically, that there is no combat resolution, I'm sure makes a big difference to anybody that like really wants to win. But when the conflict in a set way is not gonna.
My favorite quote of all time, I think we're going to just frame it, is that we had people coming to us about the combat system, and they attempted to write combat systems for us. We've had 4 different combat systems written for us, because they want to fix our game, right? They're like, why don't you have a combat system?
That's amazing.
Wait, what needs to be fixed?
Well, there's
That's
not a
right.
point value system. There's not a specific spell always beats specific spell.
Like I said, what needs to be fixed?
Exactly, right? But they are continually trying to fix it. And so the issue is, and we keep talking about it being consent-based, and someone actually says to us, but how do I make them consent? You just nothing to say back to this,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
This is you.
Go think about
This
your
is the
life for a
point.
while.
Actually, you talk about an event like that, and high five lady designers, all of us. But I have written, I wrote a LARP. It's called Reclaiming Earth. I've been, I talk about it a lot. I do design stuff on it, and my husband is, he plays in games. He's a storyteller. He likes doing all that stuff. But he literally, his input was, Danielle, that sounds kind of racist. And I'm like, okay, I'll change it. Like his input was to read it and give me pointers. It was not to help create in any way, shape, or form, other than maybe like some card trips where I'm like, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? And he would challenge my ideas, and then I would reform them based on that. And we go to do games or we go to do things, and people are running up to him asking him questions and like, oh, please help me with this thing, and and he's like, I don't know any of this. You have to ask Danielle. She wrote it. Like I'm just here to help.
But yeah, I mean, it's like women in tech, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just this is just the way it is. There's also pushback on female designers or non-white, non-male, non-heteronormative designers, because of a notion that by telling these news stories and by valuing some different things that we are breaking or ruining.
Well,
I guess my favorite is like it's not a game. Like in the video game space, it's like there's no jumping. It's not a game.
Oh, I think the best way I could think of to phrase that is by creating new things and giving value to those, you're invalidating the things that have come before. And while that's not true, that is the perception. So women coming in, creating new content, they're taking away you're taking my game away from me because you're creating this foo-foo game with no combat mechanics out there.
So we've got about 15 minutes left. I would love to hear, like, from each of you what your hardball question is, since maybe I'm not quite in touch with what the cutting edge stuff is going down the pipe. So what do you think is the biggest thing that's on your mind about gender and sexuality in LARP? What is the biggest, like, hot topic that you want to talk about, and we can spend a few minutes on each, and then we'll wrap up.
Oh, geez. Oh, geez. I mean, I've had a chance to have so many incredible conversations and be part of some amazing discussions in this conference. And while there's this exciting rules mechanic approach and social approach, like ways of making the game consent-based, yay, all that's really exciting for me. One of the huge gender issues that it always comes back to is that there's a disproportionate amount of harassment, stalking, and sexual assault directed towards female, presenting female-identified players, and that if these situations aren't, and I mean this is definitely talking about the big campaign larks where you just have big parts of the population cycling through a lot, and so you're getting more of an intersection of different communities already. It's not the same as I'd say like a Nordic community where you already know each other and have these more intimate kinship networks going. But at least in these campaign works, having better models to address those situations, having avoiding situations where there's a repeat aggressor who has now pushed 5 women out of the space, which is something that I witnessed repeatedly in the early 2000s and was, at least at that time, endemic. It's really exciting to talk to Dystopia Rising folks and to see the shift that's happened in the last 10 years in that writing part towards victims even being able to have a voice, being able to know they can go to organizers about those situations has really changed the dynamics. Rather than this thing happened to me that's impossible to comprehend, I will now like leave that community and be traumatized forever, which is sort of the model we were running in the early 2000s. So while all this other stuff is like, I'd say more just exciting from an intellectual standpoint, the big thing that I just keep coming back to is safer spaces and having policies and communications and just repeatedly acknowledging that victims can come forward, or targets, or whatever term you want to use, and figure out what those terms are. And I guess the big question, that I have for Larping for the World is like how to better incorporate those things as social practice.
So, like, you're probably all going to say things that are like really great. So, like that's.
Still trying to think of something.
I know. So, well, actually, it's different, and not that that's not a concern, because it is a concern. I'm glad you said it, because it is something that I'm glad to see that we're moving forward from, but it is still a problem. We're only just admitting that things like rape culture exist, and that we're not just making that word up, and stuff like that. But so for me, it's actually about expectations. Expectations for genders and for sexuality in LARPs, where people come to LARP as a form of escapism. They come into LARP to experience an experience, and often that experience is not their normal everyday life. And so, managing gender expectations and sexuality expectations where everybody can come and experience a wonderful experience that is not endemic to their life. My life is the struggle of constantly having sexist acts against me, or misgendered, or like bigotry because of my sexual preferences. But when I walk into this life, it's a safe space because I can, I'm not just portraying being gay because I am gay, but there are straight people who are exploring being gay and trying to understand it better, to like, and when they leave this space, they'll have a better understanding of what that's like, and they'll understand me better, and that's actually kind of cool. And it's the safe space for people to explore things that they are not used to. I don't know what it's like to be trans, but maybe I can change my gender in this LARP and kind of get a feeling for what it's like to be that way. I don't know what it's like to be, a person of color, but in a lot of LARPs, they try. When you talk about race, but like in Dystopia Rising, there's all these different strains, and so I'm not necessarily experiencing what it's like to be, Black or Hispanic or anything else, but I am experiencing what it's like to be the minority strain or there's lots of negative connotations for this group of people, and so you can kind of be in a minority group when you're not normally and experience what that's like in a safe space, and everybody can experience that together, and we have this kind of expectation for how that will play out, and I kind of like the idea of LARPs breaking those expectations down and changing them inside of people and leaving LARP space and having a different worldview altogether in their real lives. So I like all the Nori LARPs that are doing that.
Do you want me to jump to Liz, or are you good? What should we mean to poor Liz?
Yeah, I will say two things. I will say we need diverse games.
Yes.
We need diverse games. And so more games written by all people, everyone, right? And more games that explore things that somebody might say is not suited for a game, right? And so number one, that. Number two,